not good enough. Don't you bring me down. I'm moving up, and you're over now. You gave me fire every time you came around. My feet are steady on the ground. You won't knock me down.
Hello everyone, I'm Glenn. Welcome to The Way Back, mine and Steph's YouTube channel that offers insight and inspiration to help you reclaim your life from addiction and, all being well, find your way back. This is Steph.
Hi friends, I'm Steph. Along with the YouTube channel, Glenn and I also share a sobriety date. It is the 17th of October 2016. We support each other and we keep each other accountable. Our hope is that with these interviews and video blogs, we can help you along your sobriety journey as well. So glad you're watching. We're talking today with author, storyteller, and yoga teacher Esther Nagle. Did I say your name right?
You did, yeah.
Okay. So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
I've been really excited about this. I've been reading your book and I'm just loving it. I'm reading the Kindle version right now, but I've ordered the paperback as well because I'm sure I'll want to refer to it in the future because I'm just starting to learn about yoga, and I just think your book is so inspirational and you have such a great story. So really glad you're here with us. So if you're ready, we can jump right in.
Absolutely, yeah. But firstly, I mean, as somebody that's hoping to make a living from writing, thank you for buying my book twice.
You're welcome. I do really love it. It's great. You're wonderful. So obviously, I do know some of your story as I'm reading your book. But tell us, if you don't mind, your addiction story. Start with your sobriety date, how long you've been sober, and then just kind of give us your background, where it all started for you and how you found your way to recovery.
Well, so my sobriety date is 12th of October 2014, and that is the morning that on the morning of that day I woke up on my sofa, which is just over there, and it was one of those okay, death, take me now moments. I'd had a really good fun night the night before where I drank everything. Even a bottle of whiskey that was at the back of the cupboard, and I don't like whiskey, but I got to that level of everything else is gone, so I must drink the whiskey. And I'd had a really fun night. It'd be, it wasn't one of those I ended up in a police cell and my life was a disaster kind of sobriety moments. I was just lying on the sofa, and I couldn't do anything, and I could barely open my eyes. I couldn't move. All my plans had to be cancelled for the day. I'd had to forget about my yoga practice for the day, and I was just lying there thinking, I was so much better yesterday when I woke up yesterday without a hangover. And so I decided then I didn't want to do that to myself anymore. I'd already, and I will go back and talk a little bit more, but I'd already reduced how much I was drinking by this point. So my hangovers were worse than they'd ever been before. And I was starting to really enjoy sober mornings and going to bed sober. I was really enjoying it. So I decided I just wanted to do that a bit more often. So I decided I wasn't going to drink the following weekend. By this point, I was only on weekends. But, we're drinking a week's worth of booze in a weekend, essentially. And so I decided not next weekend, and then next weekend came and I didn't drink, and I thought, right, let's extend it, and I kept extending it, just taking it one step at a time. At no point was I thinking, this is it, I've given up drinking, until my brother's wedding, and my brother's wedding was this amazing, beautiful day, and I decided I wasn't going to drink. And there was wine everywhere. At any point I could put my hand up and had a really big glass of very nice, expensive red wine, and nobody would have minded until I drank too many of them and made a fool of myself. And I didn't. And at that point, that was in November. So my sobriety date is the 12th of October, but the date that I actually gave up drinking was about 6 weeks later, and I don't even remember the date at the moment. But I marked the 12th of October because that is the last day I had a hangover.
I read about that story in your book, and I thought that was great how you said that you'd already sort of been sober and were just starting to consider yourself to be recovering alcoholic, or kind of using that terminology in your own mind anyway, and then you went to your brother's wedding and realized, like, no, I don't drink anymore. I'm not a drinker, and I'm not an alcoholic, and I thought that was really great.
Yeah, it was funny. I only started using the word alcoholic once I stopped drinking. I wouldn't accept it at that point. Until that point, I wouldn't accept that I had a drinking problem until I'd managed to get a grip on it and stop. 20 years of extremely good denial.
That's very similar. I was exactly the same. Never once considered, really. Knew deep down, but yeah. And then, as you say, you put the drink down. It's I was an alcoholic. It's crazy not doing it.
Yeah, but I think if you accept and own that, then you have to do something about it. And I imagine probably like you, I wasn't ready to do anything about it until I got there by accident, really. Because my recovery didn't really feel like recovery. At no point was I saying I need to stop drinking. It was much more of a needing a life recovery than anything else. And the stopping drinking happened as a consequence of everything else that was going on in my life. As did the drinking in the first place. The drinking doesn't come on its own. It comes because of other stuff that's going on. So once you start to heal all that other stuff, then you can just leave the drinking. And that's certainly the way it was for me anyway. I know I kind of did it the other way around than a lot of people do, I think. But my sort of recovery itself, my whole life recovery started with after 20 years of living a completely chaotic life, I had a nervous breakdown, and it felt like the worst thing in the world at the time. But with hindsight, it was the best thing because it took me to yoga teacher training. Rather than, I need mental health help or I need recovery help, I didn't, I don't need that. I need to train to be a yoga teacher. And through going to yoga teacher training, I actually ended up getting all the help and support and healing that I needed without being put on antidepressants and being sent off to meetings.
So take us back to when it began for you. What age were you when you started to use drugs, drink, that sort of thing?
Well, I started drinking when I was 16, but then it was just social, just go out and have a couple of halves of cider and go home feeling quite nicely tipsy. But I think there was seeds planted at that point, even though I was nowhere near drinking alcoholically then. There was definitely seeds planted because I liked the way it made me feel. I liked the fact that I felt more confident. I had horribly low self-confidence. I couldn't talk to boys. I could barely talk to girls. I could barely talk to myself. I didn't really have any confidence at all. And alcohol gave me that confidence. But when I was 20, my life just kind of imploded, and I made some catastrophic decisions. And my low self-esteem turned into huge amounts of hatred, absolutely, totally self-loathing. I couldn't bear to be my own company. I was probably, I sometimes look back and I find it quite surprising sometimes that I didn't actually try and kill myself, because I was that low that I'm surprised. I think I was just too scared to do that. So in the end, instead, alcohol was a way of just escaping. I could hit that oblivion point. I learned very quickly that if I drank enough, then I could just disappear for a little while. And although I would always end up in floods of tears and making my life much, much worse as a result of everything and anything I did when I was drunk, that feeling of just disappearing for a little while was always very compelling. So from 20, that's what I did. Whenever life got too much for me, I would just disappear for a little while. And of course, then my whole social circle had to involve alcohol. I made sure that all my friends were drinkers. There was lots of drugs as well. Marijuana every day. I wasn't all that keen on other drugs. I took a lot of speed and acid when I was younger, but I was a big weed fan. I liked getting stoned a lot. And combining the two, which I just think now, God, how on earth did I function at all? But I was fairly functional. I had a child at 20. 24, 23. And I went and did a degree then. I did a 4-year degree trying to teach, to be a primary school teacher. So I was very functional, but I was going home and drinking nearly every night and smoking every day. Sometimes if I didn't have a lecture until the afternoon, I would go into college stoned. I would be doing a lot my coursework with a glass of cider and a joint at the side, but I was incredibly functional. I sometimes think, God, I could have been. What could I have achieved if I'd been sober?
I think that's
I got a 2-1 in my degree. I think, wow, could I have got a first? But then, there's no point having that conversation. But so yeah, I finished there when I was nearly 30. And I moved back home, back to the Rhondda, where I still am. I was only supposed to be here for 6 months. And that was 15 years ago, and I'm still here. And my social circle all that time revolved around drinking. If I used to say, if people didn't like getting drunk, I didn't know how to be friends with them. And I used to think that was a joke. Yeah. But actually now that was really true. I didn't. If somebody came into my life who didn't like getting drunk with me, they didn't stick around for very long, because probably they didn't like me, and I didn't know how to be with them, because I couldn't get my head around the idea that you could socialize and bond with somebody over a cup of tea. How can you have a conversation with somebody unless you're getting drunk together? So it influenced everything, every aspect of my life completely. It was what I turned to when I was needing stress relief, when I wanted to celebrate, when I wanted to commiserate, whatever happened, there was always a reason to get drunk somewhere along the line with that. I remember there were several instances along the way when I had these little glimmers of awareness that I had a problem. I remember, it must have been 13 or 14 years ago now, I set myself a challenge that I had a bottle of cider and a lump of pot in my bedroom, in my wardrobe, and I challenged myself to see how long I could keep them there. And that was, and I had a notebook, and every time I wanted to open them or go and smoke, I was writing stuff down about how I felt. And I wish I still had that notebook, because I would love to know what I wrote the night I decided to just think, oh, to hell with it, I'm going to drink it, I'm going to smoke it, because it lasted maybe 2 weeks, if that. But I know that worked for me, but I would imagine that at some point I realized, if I need to do this must mean I have a problem. And that probably pushed me to actually, if I'm an alcoholic, then I may as well drink it. And I remember another friend of mine once telling me that I was an alcoholic, and my response was, well, I don't drink as much as you, so I can't be. Because he was my standard. He was one of my best friends, and I needed him because he was my standard of, I'm not as bad as him. And that was why I needed him. I mean, I loved him dearly, but, I kind of did use that very much of, I'm not as bad as him, so I'm not that bad.
Yeah. I think we all did that. I talk about that a lot, how we surround ourselves with mirrors, when we're drinkers. You want people in your life who drink the way you do, so you don't have to look at your own drinking, because it's always, everyone's talking about what we did last night, and I don't remember this, and you did this, and it's a big laugh. And to look at that now, it seems ridiculous, but when you're in it, and that's the people you surround yourself with, this is what we do, it's how it is, this is life.
Yeah, and I think that's human nature in general. We do, the people we, and everything that's in our life is a reflection of who we are. I've been listening to a lot of people talking about the law of attraction at the moment, and it is, the experiences that you have, that without even wanting to go all woo hippie on you, but the things that happen in our lives are very much a product of who we are, because we do create our own reality. And so, and I don't think that it's a coincidence that when I started to heal, I've jumped forward a little bit now, but when I started to heal, without being conscious of it, I went and joined a group of women who got together on a Monday morning, who talked about lots of deep stuff, and none of whom, as far as I know, drink particularly. And there's a real, I think I met those the week before I had my last drink. And I don't think that there's a coincidence there, that I already had that new support circle of women who I could talk to about emotions, who didn't revolve around drinking.
Mm-hmm.
A cup of tea and a cake.
Yeah. In your book, you also mention another sort of I think you called it your first real spiritual experience, and you were pregnant. You were still a drinker, and like it was before you officially got sober. You weren't drinking during your pregnancy, but that you had an experience at the beach. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that stuck with me so much over the years. That's when I was pregnant with my second child, who is now 20. And I'd gone away with his father. We borrowed my dad's transit van, and we went away for a couple of days, sleeping in the back of the van, staying in different campsites at the Gower in West Wales. And it was a pretty awful few days. And we argued a lot. And this one day we had this blazing argument. I don't remember what the argument was about. It's not important. And I stormed away from him, and I walked past this pub. And I really wanted to go into the pub. And I thought, well, can't do that. Because I knew that if I'd gone into the pub, I would have, I want to get drunk. I didn't want to just sit and have a glass of lager. I wanted to get drunk. And I knew I couldn't do that. And so I walked past the pub, and I went and sat on the wall at the side of the sea. And it was quite dark at this point. The sun was setting. It was in the summer, so it must have been quite late. And I could see the white, the white foam of the waves, and I could hear the sound of the waves as it was coming in and out. And I think I got quite hypnotized by these waves. And I was just sitting there for, I don't know how long I was there for, but I was just listening to these waves. And I just remember thinking, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Because that sea is going to just keep doing that. And that feeling of being so insignificant absolutely blew my mind. It was incredible. It was just, it calmed me down so much. I think the noise of the sea had already, that sound, it is such a calming sound anyway, isn't it? But that thought that there was just no need to worry, because we're just going to do our thing and the sea's just going to carry on. We'll be long gone, and that sea will be still doing that. It just blew my mind. And that was the first time in my entire life that I actually felt that sense of connection. And that sense of being something very tiny, but being part of something so huge and so timeless. I think it was the timelessness of it. And then over the years then, I think my sort of very tentative forays into spirituality and religion always focused on Eastern religions and anything that, I love the idea of reincarnation, and I love that timelessness of the soul. And I think that it probably originated that day with that idea of the timelessness of the universe, of the sea and everything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. So, okay, go back some more again and to your when you were in your addiction. Did you have a rock bottom moment, or was it kind of a series of rock bottoms?
I had a rock bottom year, 2013. I mean, everything was awful, really, for most of my adult life. I'd have moments of brief feelings of happiness in amongst so much stress, and I constantly creating problems for myself. But in 2013 that was my year of just basically hitting a wall. And it started at the very start of the year when I went back to work after Christmas into a new job that I was absolutely in love with. I'd only been there for about 2 months. I was in love with this job. It was wonderful. And this lovely team, in this lovely organisation. And then we went back in after Christmas, and there had been a discovery over Christmas that one of the long-term employees had been embezzling money from the organisation. And this discovery I mean, it rocked the organization in terms of their financial security. There were lots of questions about the governance of the organization then as well. And it unleashed this kind of worms. It shook people's relationships. There was a massive lack of trust. And there was this feeling that we might turn up and find the doors locked at any moment. And there was a small team. We were working on a very particular project. There was this very small team that I was in, and I was the only one who was completely and utterly responsible for my family's finances. Everybody else had husbands, partners. I was the only single parent, and so this was terrifying for me. And so that was incredibly stressful, and I ended up getting another job halfway through the year that I should never have taken. It would have been an ideal job a year previously, but I was not in a good state of mind to take this job at the time. While all that was going on, we also discovered that there was somebody else, and not me, in the family that had a really bad drinking problem. And we discovered this when they were in meltdown. They were absolutely in breakdown, suicide attempts, and really screaming out for help, falling apart. I mean, we didn't even know there was a drinking issue. And then it was, we might not even survive this. It went from we didn't know anything about it to are we going to be planning another funeral in the family very quickly. And that was really scary. Obviously it was scary, but at the same time for me, like we talked about already, there was a mirror right in front of me. And no, for the first time, I was left wondering, oh my God, this should be me. When my brother died in 2005, and I couldn't work out how that wasn't me, given my lifestyle. Why was I not the one in an early grave? And again, I was thinking, I should be the one doing all this. I should be the one that everyone is angry with at the moment, that's in hospital, that's being sectioned, that's having all this happen. And I couldn't work out why it wasn't me. And obviously then the way I dealt with that was by getting drunk and smoking and crying and, just not able to deal with it. And we also found out that my mother had cancer at the same time as well. So there was a lot going on. And my ex-partner and I were in the middle of World War III. It was horrendous, most horrendous separation. It was just nasty, real knives in the back job. So I'd sort of gone through life on a bit of a tightrope anyway, and I couldn't stay on it anymore. I couldn't cope. And in August of that, there was a moment when I was listening to a song, Queens of the Stone Age song, of their new album. It was new at the time, and the song is called "I Appear Missing." And I'd been listening to it completely obsessively for weeks. I couldn't. It was like, if I could have injected it into my veins, I would have. It was that I was that addicted to this song. And after the training day from work in my new job, I was listening to this song, and I suddenly heard the words for the first time, and I thought, oh my God, this is me. This whole album is me. The album is full of songs about loss and about betrayal and about feeling lost and mental turbulence, and I thought, this is me. And 3 weeks later, the inevitable breakdown happened. I think that had kind of just opened the wound for me to really look into, like, I'm a mess. And a few weeks after that, I quit my job, going from £28,000 a year to about £80 a week, but preferring poverty to, whatever was going to happen to me if I'd stayed in my job. And so a few months after that, I decided to train to be a yoga teacher. Mm-hmm. And that was the best decision I ever made, because that yoga teacher training saved my life on so many levels. It saved my, it's how I stopped drinking. It's how I stopped smoking. It's how I learned to be with myself. It's how I learned to be able to talk about my spiritual vacuum, and to even realize that I had a spiritual vacuum and to find something to replace it with. I learned I learned to get through life. I learned to live, essentially. I learned to really live and to be able to like myself. I can actually be in my own company and not be constantly telling myself what an absolute disaster zone I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's worth that's worth the £2,000 training fee in itself.
But now
Definitely.
this it wasn't an immediate thing, right? Because you talk about in your book how you started the yoga teacher training and you were doing, or was it that you were doing yoga and then you got sober? Like you were still drinking when you started yoga.
I was still, I'd been doing yoga for about 6 years at that point, maybe a little bit longer. And I mean, yeah, I thought I was good at yoga because I was flexible and I could do the postures. And so I thought I was this perfect yogi type. But I was going home from my classes and getting drunk, because it wasn't doing what I needed it to be doing at that point.
So you were just doing the physical yoga.
I was only doing the postures. I couldn't do the breathing. I mean, you can. I've got a cold at the moment, but I've also got a dust allergy, so my nose is very often blocked. So I really struggled with the breathing because my nose was always blocked, so I couldn't do the breathing exercises. And I found them I used to get really angry when my teacher wanted me to do it. I used to find myself getting angry. I really couldn't bear it. But then when I was doing my teacher training, I learned how to do it properly. And I had to do it. I wasn't given a choice. I had to learn how to do these breathing exercises. And they actually, I don't have such problem with my allergies anymore or my asthma anymore because I know how to breathe properly now. And there's an amazing line, which has just dawned on me now, but thinking about how I resisted breathing for so long. If you've ever read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, he talks about resistance and about how when we procrastinate, everything that we do to avoid doing what we're meant to do in our life is down to resistance. And he says the thing that you resist the most is the thing that is most vital to your soul's evolution. Well, I was resisting learning to breathe. And now, it's only just dawned on me now, but that was the crux of it for me. There were many other things that I learned in my yoga teacher training, but for me, the most important thing was learning to breathe properly, because we all need to breathe. You can't last very long without breathing. So if you learn to do it properly, it's so transformational. And so, it's really interesting how much I absolutely hated it before. And then as soon as I was ready and open to the change, I was able to learn to do it, and it changed my life. Absolutely transformed me.
I'm stuck there right now because I'm just starting yoga, and I've only just recently been starting meditating, and I just do like guided meditations and sometimes listen to sounds or music, and I try and do the breathing, but I really struggle with like the breathing into your belly, and you did say you would help me with that, and I appreciate it because I do want to learn more about the breathing because I'm not quite there. I'm stuck as well.
It's not easy, especially in our society, we're not really encouraged to do anything that allows our bellies to expand, are we? As women, we're supposed to have flat stomachs. We're told breathing in. I don't know if it's the same in America, but in Britain, if you tell somebody breathe in, what you mean is suck your belly in to make yourself look thinner. Well, that's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish, because when we breathe in, if you're breathing into the bottom of your lungs, which is where you're trying to do it, your abdomen's going to get bigger. Your belly actually gets bigger. And it took me a long time to be able to do that, because I've had, believe me, in the past, I've had a lot of issues around my belly being bigger than I would like it to be. So the idea of actually willfully making it bigger, I really struggled with. Now I'll do it, and I can sit in front of a room full of people and have them all watching my belly get bigger, and it's fine, and I'm sort of, well, I'm 44, I'm the mother of 3, and it's okay, I'm never going to be a size 6 supermodel, that's fine. But it is not the way that we're used to breathing. It's the way we're born breathing. If you look at babies, if you look at very small children, they do it. I watched my little boy. He doesn't do it anymore now. He's 7 now. But when he was 5, he just breathed into he breathed properly. He did it properly. But we learn through sitting on chairs, through slouching, through slumping at the desk, through society telling us to keep our bellies hidden. We learn to breathe badly, and it takes a while to get it. But you work with somebody that can teach you to do it, and it does come. It just takes practice, and you've got to be conscious of what you're doing. You've got to make time in your day to consciously do it, and you can persuade your muscles to do it even without your breath being involved. You can practice just expanding your belly, and that helps.
And if you do pay attention to that connection when you're not breathing properly, you can sense that if you're only breathing into the upper part of your chest and you're like shallow breathing, it's connected to the tension and the stress and the anxiety, and when you do kind of let that go and try to breathe properly, it can be so transformative in how you go through day to day.
Yeah, it really does. And it doesn't. You don't need to do it very many times for it to actually have an impact. If you're feeling really stressed, if you're in a moment, if you're having a really stressful moment, if you take 3 breaths and you make sure that those breaths are deep, you will see even one deep breath can give you tremendous benefits. We get very rewarded very quickly from these practices.
So just take us back quickly though to your drinking. What were your drinking habits like? Were you a daily drinker towards the end?
Yeah.
So how much were you drinking?
Most days. And if I didn't drink on a particular day, it was a conscious decision not to drink.
Okay.
And it was a conscious decision that I had to hold myself to. And it was one that I would very often manage to find an excuse. I'm not going to drink this morning. Oh, look, something bad has happened. Therefore, I'm allowed to now. And I looking back now, I don't have these terrible things happening to me anymore. So I think probably I was engineering them all. Obviously unconsciously, but I think I was creating stressful situations. I'd go looking for things to annoy me, so that I would have an excuse to drink. But most people, nobody knew how much I was drinking. I barely knew. I barely acknowledged it. I remember hiding. We have these clear bags for our recycling here, and I remember quite a few times I would have to put out maybe 2 this week and hide another one around the back, because I didn't want my bin men to know, because I knew that my rubbish was telling a really clear story. That I couldn't quite bring myself to put it all out in one go, because it was just like, oh God, what's been going on in this house?
Yeah, it's like we all talk about the going to different shops so they don't see you every few days or whatever buying your regular supply.
I had these lots of little rules, like I wouldn't drink when the kids were up. Unless I had friends around, or unless there was all these other little clauses that I could put in to justify it. But yeah, drinking most days. And if I went anywhere that had where there was no drinking, I'd normally have to have something waiting for me at home as well.
Okay. So
Sounds familiar.
Did you consider yourself to be physically dependent, or did you feel like you needed drink?
I don't know. Probably. I mean, I don't think I ever went long enough without it to really find out. I would quite often, many times I'd wake up shaking. Yeah, that was never fun. But I don't. It was always. I think it was more of a stress response to me. But I suppose I was physically dependent on it as well. I mean, I was living in this state of tension created by alcohol, and also calmed by alcohol. So it's like, obviously, as if I needed alcohol to keep my nervous system in the state it was used to being in. So there's a physical dependence there.
Yeah.
But I never went into any kind of detox program. Well, I did yoga. It's a pretty effective detox, actually.
Yeah. So I guess talk about that more than finding your way to recovery. You touched on it earlier, but so your drinking was kind of at its worst. You had that really bad year, and then tell us about getting sober.
So I started going to yoga teacher training, and it was monthly classes. One weekend every month we had to go to a class, and I had daily practices to do. And I quickly realized that the only way I could guarantee I was going to get this done was to get up early in the morning and do it before the day started, because once the kids got up and the day went on, I never seemed to get it done. So I started to realize that I needed to start going to bed earlier and getting up earlier. So I thought, and I just thought, because at this point I was still fairly much in denial about my drinking anyway. So I just thought, right, I won't drink in the week then. So I could do yoga in the week. And then at the weekends, it's okay. I can have a drink at the weekends and it'll be fine. So I was going for 5 days a week without drinking, which was novelty. That was a real novelty. And it was being made possible because I was getting up at 5 or 6 or something. So come the evening, I was absolutely exhausted. So the idea of staying up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning drinking just wasn't possible anyway. And I was getting up and doing something that made me feel really good as well. So I was starting the day feeling good, and I was going to bed feeling good because I'd had a good start to the day. And I was just gradually untying all these knots in my muscles and just generally gradually releasing all this stuff. And part of what we had to do, as well as the physical stuff and the learning to breathe, we had to do a lot of writing. And I was supposed to be keeping a diary, but I'm terrible at keeping a diary. Anything that feels like routine or something that I have to do every single day, I will resist. So the fact that I had to do a yoga practice every day, that was enough. And I couldn't even manage that every day. I'm very ENFP and possibly ADD, and I'm not very good at fitting into routines at all. So I didn't do the diary, but I would write these essays that just basically became streams of consciousness as I was just offloading everything that was in my head into these supposed essays. My poor yoga teacher. I mean, the things that I haven't gone back and read most of these because I just think, oh no, they're cringe if I read them. But I was just offloading so much, and there would be many times when I'd be sitting, I did most of my work sitting here. I would be sitting here and I'd sit back in the chair and I'd be looking at what I'd just written, thinking, holy shit, what? And I didn't know what I thought until I saw it written on the screen. So I was getting out all this stuff that I'd been carrying around with me in my head for years, started to see patterns between things that happened when I was a child and things that were happening now. And so it was basically like, I've always said that year of teacher training was like 5 years of really good therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And probably better therapy than anyone else could have given me, because it was just me and my subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting really deep into what was actually going on inside my head. Mm-hmm. And so I did so much releasing through that, sitting here at this table, just writing stuff. That healing was an inevitability, really. I think that there was no way I was going to do that process and not come out of it a better person. Mm-hmm. And a healthier person. I remember reading at the start of the course, reading through some of the stuff, thinking, "Oh, this could mean I'm going to give up smoking." And I remember saying to my mother, "I bet I'll give up smoking through this." Still not even, and at that point, I didn't think about drinking. Mm-hmm. Because I still didn't think it was a problem. but yeah, I wasn't prepared for how quickly that transformation happened. It was like, well, I was going from month to month to my classes, and that I was always getting told how different I looked and how different I was in my personality. I was a lot calmer. Apparently, when I first turned up there, I was just, I mean, I think I'm quite hyper now, but apparently I was just like this electrified ball of chaos, when I first turned up.
Right.
And I still feel like that now a lot of the time, but I'm a lot calmer. I'm never going to be, like a Zen Buddhist monk. I'm always going to be quite exuberant and loud and chaotic, but I'm calmer, and I'm always getting calmer than I was.
In the foreword of your book, and I won't even try and say the name of who wrote the foreword of your book.
Kalavati.
Okay. That's how you were described as, just the transformation was amazing. That like everyone in the course was changing, but you were just this. It was dramatic. Your transformation, physical, mental, your skin. I mean everything, and your spiritual transformation as well. So
yeah, and I think I look younger now than I did. I think I look younger now than I did 10 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
But certainly there's pictures of me at the start of the course compared to pictures of me now, and I think, God, wow, even me without makeup on looks healthier than me with makeup on back then.
Yeah. Amazing. So I want to talk a bit more about yoga. As I say, I'm just learning it, but in your book you describe some of the tools that yoga offers that can help people to take control of their life and break away from stressful behavior patterns and addictive patterns. So can you tell us more specifically about those tools and that? Sorry.
I have a question. Just before you get into the yoga side of it then, because I'm a complete novice at this, so I'm a bit of a bystander. What is yoga?
Ooh, what is yoga? Do you know there are entire books written to try and answer that question? So yoga is, at its simplest, yoga is it's a way of life. We're sold the idea of yoga as an exercise class in the West, but actually it's a whole way of life. It's a way of connecting physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of our being with the spiritual, physical that's out there, however you choose to name it. So in its purest form, yoga is a path to spiritual connection. Really speaking, it's if you were to take yoga at its absolute purest, it's a path to enlightenment. It's a path to God. Whatever way, I use the word God in a very generic kind of way there. But on a more kind of material, functional kind of thing, if you were to look at your life in respect to the yoga philosophy and apply the philosophies of yoga to your life, you would be living a life in balance. So. And that's balancing you, balancing your relationships, balancing your relationship with the world in general, balance between us as a species and the rest of life on this planet. It's about balance. Yoga is a pathway to balance at its simplest. It's not a simple thing to explain.
No, that's good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
No, but thank you for asking that, Glenn, because you're absolutely right. I was jumping right into like the tools, but yeah, I thought of yoga as being a class I take at the YMCA, but it's actually the breathing and it's the spiritual learning. There's so much more to it than just the postures and the poses. And I think a lot of people, as you experienced, Esther, doing the physical yoga for a long time and getting nothing more out of it than maybe more flexibility and a bit more strength, but not actually, getting out of it what it's really meant to be about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think now with hindsight, I think that my approach to yoga before had actually been making my problems worse, because I was never able to relax. So I was doing all the postures, putting a lot of tension into my body, and never allowing that to release and relax. So I was actually leaving my classes, even though I thought I've been to yoga, I feel relaxed, I actually clearly wasn't, because I was going home and getting pissed. I was going home and then spending the next 3 hours getting myself to the state of oblivion that I needed before I could go to bed. So it was possibly actually making it worse.
So, quick question. This could be completely wrong. So, I've got a very basic understanding of mindfulness. Now, am I right in thinking that yoga becomes the next level of that? So it's not just your mind, it's using your full body, but kind of to focus on what you kind of do with mindfulness. Is it similar to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, yoga is mindfulness.
Right.
You know, you can mindful, but there's lots of different ways of approaching mindfulness. And I've just bought these books because I want to learn about a bit more about the language of mindfulness, because you know there is a whole thing of mindfulness where there's a particular exercises that people do that I don't know about. But if you are practicing what I know, that naturally leads you to mindfulness. There's a lot of similarities between the like a body scan meditation that you do in a mindfulness practice. There's the watching of the breath, being in the moment. It's all about being in the moment, and yoga is very, very much about being in the moment. But with yoga, you do your mindfulness practice, but then, as you said, with yoga, then you've got the added levels of you bringing your body into it much more. But yoga, because it's that way of life, if you start with the yamas and the niyamas, the basic moral and ethical foundations of yoga, and apply that to your whole life, it's all about mindful living.
Right.
So it's like mindfulness on steroids.
But as you mentioned before we actually started the interview and we were just chatting, the mindful walking, like there are other physical practices of paths to enlightenment or mindfulness. You know, the mindful walking, Tai Chi is one. There are other ways of meditational movement. Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, like with walking, you could be so hyper in the moment when you're walking. You can be really, you could walk, you could just go from A to B, or you can really slow it down and be really aware of what is going on in your body, what's going on around you. You could do that with anything. You could do it when you're washing the dishes. You could do it when you're sitting with your children. You could do it when you're stroking your dog. You could do it when you're clipping your toenails. You could do it with anything. It's about that awareness of and that being in the moment, and just like what is going on for me right now, and just coming into now.
Now, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when you start practicing meditation, yoga, these sort of things, that can naturally sort of bring you to a place where you are more mindful in your day-to-day. You can try to mindfully wash the dishes, but if you're practicing mindfulness and meditation and that sort of thing, then when you're doing the dishes, you sort of become more mindful. Is that right? Like it's sort of a cause and effect?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I notice it in things like I am renowned for losing things, and I've always been, the kind of person who, I mean, all ready to leave the house. They're like, right, where are my keys? Where's my purse? Where's this? And I never know where anything is. But now that doesn't happen so much, and I put that down to that. Basically, I am more mindful of what I'm doing with things. So I'm more. That's how it manifests for me. Is I'm less chaotic. Because I'm not trying to do 20 different things all at once. I'm only trying to do 10 things at once now. And so it's, it's a quietening down of your mind, and it's, and for me, because I've already said, I'm ENFP, I'm sure I would probably be diagnosed as ADD if I went and asked the question. So for me, it's not possible to actually just focus on one thing at any moment. And I don't think it is for most people anyway. I think you have to be really advanced or maybe for particular people, I don't know. But certainly most of the people I've ever spoken to have that slightly overly busy brain.
Yeah, I think we would all be ADD if we took a test. You know, like they say, it's a spectrum now. It's not just a diagnosis; it's a
Yeah,
spectrum. I think we would
yeah,
all fall in that spectrum of attention deficit. Yeah.
yeah. So it is. It's. I mean, for me now, it's things like, I can start washing the dishes and I finish them rather than wandering off and doing 20 other things before I finish washing the dishes. That's progress. That's not the ultimate part. That's not my goal. But for me, there's a mindfulness in that I can think, right, I'm washing the dishes now, and I'm going to stay here until I finish washing the dishes. And then I'll move on to the next thing, rather than I've washed 3 cups. Oh, I was going to, go off and do something else.
But I think it's also a metaphor for like how to live your best life, staying in mindful in washing dishes, but it's also staying in the moment and not always looking for the next thing, which I think is very much connected to addictive behaviors and addictive thinking. Is you always want more, you want the next thing. I was talking recently about my kids and how they'll open their Christmas presents and then start talking about what they want for their birthday, and like be here now, be within the moment you're in and take it in and enjoy it, and don't think about what's happening in an hour or 2 hours or next week. It's like right now. And that's all tied into it. And I think that's probably part of why this sort of practice is so beneficial to those of us with addictions, because it is sort of I don't like to use the word disease, but disease of always wanting more, always wanting something else or different than what's right here, right now.
Yeah, and I think that, outside of the world of people with recognized addictions, I think that you've just described our society in general. That, you've only got to turn on your TV and we're constantly bombarded with, well, you should want this now, you should want this, watch this. Even when we're in the middle of watching one thing, they're advertising the next thing at us. And they're advertising, if you're on holiday, what are you going to think about your next holiday? It's like the whole of our society is pushing us to want more all the time. And I think that's why there's this huge rise in these kinds of practices now, and people becoming more open to the more what's the word I want? Spiritual, I suppose, practices, because we've started to realize how deeply unsatisfying that is. We know, because we've all come out of actual recognized addiction. But I think beyond that, there's also this recognition that this constantly wanting more, this constantly grasping, isn't healthy for us on any level of our being, and especially not spiritually.
Exactly. And then you add to that the fact that this generation, they all they've ever known is the instant gratification of clicking on their phone and having something pop up immediately. They want to search something, it's right there. We used to have to go to the library and it took hours to do research, and now it's like, I'll just Google it. And it's bringing up, anyway, that's a whole other topic for another webinar, but it's true. It's very true how connected this sort of behavior and the way the world is today and addiction.
Gabor Mate talks about addiction and society, that we are an addictive society. And also Georg Furstein, who wrote about yoga. He was a really accomplished yoga academic. He wrote it's an audio presentation that I've got about yoga, and he talks about the addiction of consumerism and that everyone is an addict. You don't realize it. Absolutely. We are an addictive society.
So let's go back then to the tools of yoga, and how people can use the tools of yoga for addiction recovery.
So wow, well, there's so much, but like I've already said, the breath for me was one of the most profound discoveries, because in our breathing, we all know we need to breathe to live. We know that that's a survival thing, But beyond survival, we can get so much from taking good breaths. Our breath is connected to our nervous system. So when we're stressed, we take these shallow breaths, and when we breathe shallow breaths, that signals to our nervous system that we're stressed. It's like it's a two-way signal. So if you're breathing short, shallow breaths all the time, your body thinks you're stressed all the time. So you're constantly kind of wired for stress all the time. So when you start to take deeper breaths and slow your breath down, it balances out your nervous system. So instead of being in the sympathetic flight or fight nervous system, you come down into the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest or digest. And then everything relaxes, everything releases and relaxes. And when we're stressed, our logical brains just go. When we're stressed, we operating from our emotions. So fear and panic and forward projections of what could go wrong are what are ruling our decision-making process. So when we take these calming deep breaths, it allows the logical brain to kick in, and we can make decisions from logical place, rational place, rather than from an emotional place. So, when if you're in a moment of craving, you're like, I've had a terrible day, I need a drink, and you're stressed, and you're in that place of fear and panic, and I can't cope unless I have a drink. Whereas if you could take a couple of breaths, if you can find some practices that are going to help you to calm down and step out of that moment of panic, because that's all it is a moment. We have a craving, and that moment of that momentary thought, it only lasts for as long as it does, because we don't let it go. If you can let go of that thought, the physical cravings themselves last seconds. It's what goes on in it's that hanging on to that thought that actually keeps it and makes it feel so real. So if we can find a way to let go of that thought and let go of that physical need, you can find that you can move on from that. And there are lots of different practices, as well as just the simple taking a deep breath. There are things that you can do to release tension in your body in seconds that can help you to move past that moment of craving, and to help you to develop better coping strategies. So when you're in that moment of stress, instead of thinking, I need a drink, you could think, right, what can I do to calm myself, to get through this? How can I get through this? There are so many. I know I'm going to cover quite a lot on the masterclass tomorrow. That's what I'm going to be taking you through, is a lot of breathing exercises.
So what about the physical postures of yoga? If you go to exercise classes and learning the postures of yoga, how does that help with addiction?
Well, again, it's all around releasing tension.
Okay.
So when you put, say, the warrior pose, yeah. So you've got your arms up like that, and your knee is bent. Well, you're putting an awful lot of tension into your body when you do that. And in the style of yoga that I've been taught and that I teach, after each posture like that, we allow the body to rest. So I know there's some types of yoga, you move from one posture to the next, and you don't stop.
Isn't that sort of a style of yoga like Kundalini? Is that the moving from one to the next?
Vinyasa flow is one, and Ashtanga yoga is another. Okay. But in the type of yoga that I was trained in, and I think this is why this was so powerful for me, because we stop between each posture, and you focus on your breath, you slow the breath down, so you're relaxing, you're bringing the body down to that calm state. You feel, you become really conscious of releasing the tension in your muscles. You become really conscious of relaxing the body, and that teaches the body and the mind the difference between tension and relaxation. And you learn how quickly you can let go of tension, and that ripples out into the rest of your life then. So, you know, if you make this a practice that you do regularly, you slowly start to see that actually impacting on yourself outside of your yoga practice as well. You know, you could be tense. Like a few months ago, I was driving and I had to swerve to avoid somebody on a roundabout, and this woman seemed completely oblivious to me. And I had to swerve, and I got into that. You know, my heart was racing. I was stressed. And then instead of spending the next hour raging about this woman and driving like a maniac and being really angry, I just took a breath and I just let it go, because there was nothing to be gained from that. But I know that a few years ago, that would have ruined my day. And that would have been the reason why I would have got drunk 12 hours later, you know. And it's just that learning to let go. So, you know, the practices, you do them at the time that you're doing them, but then it's training your mind and your body to respond differently to different things. That's where the power of it comes from. It's over practice. You can get a lot of benefit from one yoga class, but if you do it regularly, that benefit is just so much more.
And you see the benefit throughout your day. It's how you sort of, it's a different way of learning to be.
Yeah, and it does ripple out into everything, every aspect.
I don't think we've mentioned the name of your book, have we?
No, I don't think we have actually. No,
here's a good plug. Off you go.
Yeah, it's called Bent Back into Shape: Beating Addiction Through Yoga, and I love the title. I wish I could claim that I invented the title, but that was publisher came up with that for me, and I think it's just wonderful.
How long has that been out?
It came out for the first time. It came out on the 15th of May last year, and then I re-released it. I edited it a little bit. I made a few changes to it and brought it out in paperback on the 12th of October. So it came out again on my second sober anniversary last year.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Excellent.
And I'm working on my second book.
So tell us about your second book. What is it called?
So that's called Follow the Path, and it's about personal growth and development through walking and yoga. So it's going to be about the connect, you know, how we can build our connection with ourselves, with each other, with nature, with God, through yoga and through being out in nature. So covering a lot of things we've already talked about here, I think, really.
And do you have a website?
I do, yeah. It's balanceandbreathe.co.uk.
Fantastic. Okay, Glenn, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. There was a lot to take in for me.
That was wonderful.
It was excellent. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know this is going to help a lot of people, and I'm going to certainly watch this back because I'm so fascinated right now with yoga. And as I say, I'm really enjoying your book. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story with us.
Am I right in thinking that you're doing a masterclass tomorrow?
Tomorrow is the masterclass, which we will post on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. Excellent.
Yes, I'll be teaching some breathing exercises and some relaxation. And we'll end with a nice deep relaxation as well.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Get your blankets.
Awesome. Great.
I like the sound of that. It sounds great. That's fantastic. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me along.